You may get asked a question where you're expected to explain what kinds of problems are raised by the concept of religious language. Religious language is language used specifically by religion that may be used differently in other contexts, or is not used in other contexts at all. There are some difficulties raised by this idea that are specific to language used by religion. As a result, this can mean that we can question whether or not the language can be analysed for meaning, or whether it really means anything. Firstly, a lot of religious language is abstract in nature. This means that it does not represent an object or item in the empirical world. As such, it refers to things that do not have a spatial existence. Things such as love or justice are abstract concepts. It is not possible to find a thing and point to it and call it love. We can point to a concrete thing like a prison and say this is an attempt to administer justice, but justice itself is not concrete at all. It is possible that an abstract quality is simply an idea or a type of thing rather than a thing in itself, but this is a difficulty when Christians say, for instance, that God exists. If God is a non-physical entity, in what way can he be said to exist? What is meant by such abstract language is unclear, and it is difficult to see what is actually meant. Similarly, religious language relates to metaphysical concepts or ideas. Meta means beyond or above. Here then, metaphysical means beyond the physical or beyond the natural world. Metaphysical ideas are often religious, and certainly religions deal with metaphysical ideas. The moment we begin to discuss ideas that are beyond the physical world, we are in the realm of metaphysics. Cosmology, the discussion of the beginnings of the universe, ontology, the study of being, these and other things are all regarding metaphysics. If we start discussing whether or not God exists, or if there is life after death, or souls, or spirits, then we are talking of metaphysical things, and thus it becomes very difficult to clearly understand what is meant or intended by such language. Often religious language uses religious-specific terminology. Concepts like apostolic succession, grace, holiness, and spirituality are all ideas that are specific to religion and are not used in any other context. It can be very difficult for those outside of the religion to know what is intended when language is used. It is also very difficult, if not impossible, philosophically to analyse the meaning of such words, especially, as we have said before, these words do not equate to any physical object or item. Religious-specific terminology does not translate to anything outside of that religion, and so a religious believer may not be able to communicate anything about their religion to a non-believer. It is not possible to test or experiment regarding assertions that are made by religious language. As we argued in AS or in the ontological argument, when a believer claims that God exists, what are they actually saying? We cannot create a test or an experiment. We cannot verify such a claim using empirical evidence, and there are no means to prove such a statement false either. If I say a chair exists, I can go and find the chair. If I say God exists, I can do no such thing. It is impossible to prove or disprove such a statement, and so we could claim that the statement is meaningless. In addition, we can say that assertions made by a religion are not open to universal experience. If I say I spoke with God, I might be telling what I believe to be the truth, but there is no way of checking whether it is true or what it might mean. What does it actually mean to say that an immortal, intangible, incorporeal being exists? It certainly cannot mean the same thing as saying that a mortal, tangible, corporeal being exists. Such language cannot equate to an objective experience or existence. As a result of all of this, we can ask how such language relates to the empirical or physical world. Since the language used is non-rational, by this we don't mean irrational necessarily, just not according to reason, then it is difficult to comprehend what it might mean for the empirical or physical world. The language we use is language of the material world. It is language that primarily describes our sense experiences, and secondarily, it attempts to make sense of those sense experiences. If we are assessing language that does not relate to the empirical, to the physical, what meaning can it have for physical, material beings? One might argue that it can have no meaning, since language has evolved to meet our empirical needs and is not an adequate tool for use in describing anything that is not concerned with the empirical. We are simply part of this empirical world, and it makes no sense to talk of anything else. It is also unclear what the function of religious language is. It sometimes appears as though it is trying to convey facts. Propositional revelation treats religious language as though it is just that, an imparting of facts. However, if this is the case, then if we apply the same criteria of assessment to it as we would any other factual claim, then the religious claims do not stand up to the tests, as we have shown earlier. Religious people often tend to qualify their statements by the addition of other words to show that their claims are slightly different. For example, if I were to say that God is loving, then we might point to the problem of evil in the world and say that this is not evident in the physical world. The believer might qualify their statement and say that God's love is so great that it transcends our understanding. At this point, the meaning of the statement God is loving lacks meaning because it does not seem to be making a factual claim in the same way as we would normally expect. If this is the case, then what is the language trying to do? It might be to elicit an emotional response or provoke moral reaction, control behaviour or inspire us, but whatever it is, it's unclear. So unclear, in fact, that even religious believers are not always in agreement about what it is trying to do. Religious language often seems to make contradictory or paradoxical claims. We hear claims regularly within Christianity that appear to be a paradox. The aforementioned problem of evil is one, but statements such as there is life after death are a paradox. Since death means the end of life, it seems to be self-contradictory to say that there is more life after life has ceased, since life clearly hasn't ceased if there's more of it. What are we to make of such claims? We cannot believe them as fact in the same way as we might believe that I had toast for breakfast. Some might try and interpret these claims as metaphorical or inspirational, but if this is the case, then the meaning is very unclear, and certainly they can't be treated as factual claims. To add to this, we can point out that the meaning, if it is not factual, is very subjective. Whether or not statements are true or false will then depend on your own emotional state, experience or point of view. At this point, the idea of such a statement being true or false actually loses meaning, because the truth can no longer be seen as something objective and accurate, but more an attitude. Knowledge of whatever the language is talking about becomes loose and unsatisfactory, and thus meaning is very unclear. All this is vital in our study of religious language. The work of philosophy and of logic hinges upon us agreeing the definitions of the terms that we're using. If we cannot agree on definitions and understand the same thing when we use such language, then however can we hope to analyse it philosophically for truth?